Hello and welcome to this webinar. Today I'm going to share with you 6 steps that you can take to become an inclusive leader. And I'm Mary Maguire. So what I'm going to cover with you today is, first of all, you're going to get to know me. Who am I? And why am I talking about D&I? And then why I chose to write about diversity, equity and inclusion, which I'm going to shorten to DE&I through most of this webinar. Why current initiatives are failing, and the benefits of getting it right. And then I'm going to share with you an exclusive framework that I've created, which is part of the best-selling book, The Inclusion Edge, that can actually take you on a step-by-step journey to make things better. Here I am. So I'm Mary Maguire and I've authored 3 books. Here's 2 of the ones in the picture here. I'm the author of The Inclusion Edge and The Female Edge, and both of them were Amazon bestsellers when they launched. Behind my writing, I've got 23 years of corporate consulting experience, and that's across many sectors and many industries. But not only my work experience, my own personal journey has been one where I've had to tackle exclusion, tackle inequity, tackle barriers to my own growth, and also as I was growing up. So I came from a very dysfunctional family in Birmingham, in England. I had a sister with autism, learning disabilities, and she was non-verbal as well. My father was an alcoholic. My mother was a highly anxious person. And I came out as gay when I was 20 odd years old. And obviously all of them experiences colour my approach to inclusion and belonging. But I believe passionately in the power of positive transformation and personal fulfillment. So I come at this subject area in a very, very positive way. I really do believe that the majority of us have positive intent, want to do the right thing, and just need to be shown the best way to do that. And equity, which is some of the things I'll be talking about today, starts with awareness. So equity is the understanding that we have an unequal playing field in the way that society is structured, in the way that our institutions run, in the way that organisations have inherent bias in the way that they run. So we have to address these inequities in our society by being aware of them, which is why engagement and having the right quality of conversations is so important, and it is part of the first step in bringing about change. And my guiding principles are bringing compassion and kindness to this subject area. How can we, through the lens of kindness, through the lens of understanding and compassion, make the right steps towards change in our society? But let me start by sharing with you why write about diversity, equity and inclusion in the first place. Well, the first one, which I've already mentioned, is inequality is baked into our society. It's everywhere, but what can we do about it? That can feel like quite an overwhelming thing when we realise that. When we start noticing it and seeing it everywhere, that can feel quite overwhelming. Well, a second thing, which is a helpful thought to go alongside that, is to remember it didn't start with you and it won't end with you. So if we know that we have been brought into a society that's inequitable, and we're likely to leave a society that is inequitable, then what we can do is we can actually maybe use that thought to empower more interesting questions which actually can move us forward, like, well, what can we do about it? What, from me, from my view of the world, from my way of seeing things, what can I do to help change things? And the first thing, and I'll talk about this a bit more as we go forward, is we can only change what we're aware of. So maybe the first step is, do I notice the way that inequality exists in society? And if I notice it, what can I do about that? And the third thing is that, certainly for me personally, is making a difference is a key career driver for me. It's one of the main bases for most of the work that I do with women, with leaders, with organisations. And I guess a central question for me is, is what I'm doing making the difference of a positive legacy for people? So, do I leave an organisation in a better place from the work I do? Do I leave a woman in a better place with the coaching I do with them? Am I helping leaders to be more inclusive in the work that I do with them? Because ultimately, I want to know that I'm leaving the world in a better place than I found it with the work that I do. So, that's a very important driver for me. But let's look at maybe some of the reasons why DE&I, diversity, equity and inclusion, are failing right now. Let me share some figures with you. So McKinsey and Lean do an annual report every year called Women in the Workplace. And although it's a US slant, I think the data can definitely be applied across UK, across Europe and many other countries in the world. And one of the things they found is that for every 100 men that are promoted, this is usually to a first line management position, only 85 women are promoted. Now that's when everything else is equal, when their educational attainment, when their experience, when their skills are on a parity. There's nothing else that is differentiating them but gender. We're finding that men are accelerating at 15% higher rate than women. Now that's the first rung of the ladder. If you go to the next level of the ladder and the next level after that, them differentials get larger and larger to the point that we see at the very top end of global organisations, there's only 30% who are women leaders. That's generally across the board. Some are doing better than others, but generally. So we can see that first level differentiation is really causing a big drive and change. The other thing to say is that since COVID, we've seen significant differences in how people are seeing employment and whether they are choosing to stay in it or not. In fact, certainly we know in the UK, which is where I'm based at the moment, that the largest economically inactive but working age group are the over 50s. They're choosing to leave the employment status at a record rate. What we also see is a gender difference across all age ranges as well. So pre-COVID, what we found was that men were probably leaving the workplace at a very, very slightly higher rate than women. It was a very small differential, probably 5% difference. What we find now is that men are leaving the workplace at roughly 1 in 5. Women, 1 in 4 women are leaving the workplace or going to a part-time role, a more flexible role, or a role which is definitely of a lower skill set than they currently have. It's roughly 1 in 4 women. And what that translates to is that there's 25% more women leaving the workplace than men. So that it exacerbates the issue about gender representation and also gender women accelerating with men in the workplace. So it's a real big differential and it's quite a worrying one. We've also know from research, this was research that was done in the UK, that bias is endemic in our recruitment processes. So researchers, when they created a fake CV, and everything on the CV was exactly the same, qualifications, educational experience, work experience, and all they did was they changed the top end of that, so they changed the name at the top. And here's what they found. If they used Anglo-Saxon names, so typical what we'd say is British or English names, them candidates did better than ones if they changed the name to some name which is from somebody who maybe came from a Pakistani background, Bangladeshi background, Nigerian background or other African background. And when we found that they were non-English names from these other more diverse backgrounds, they had to put in 60% more applications to get a call back. Now remember, the only thing that was different was the name at the top. Everything else was the same. So we know that this bias is something that actually is playing out. The other thing that we found is that leaders who come from what we call majority culture, so in the UK that will be white, Anglo-Saxon, usually heterosexual, usually male, so they're the majority leaders profile, felt that DE&I was just so fraught with difficulties, so fraught with challenges, that it wasn't on their priority list. So it wasn't that they didn't think it was important, it was just that it wasn't important to them because it was just put into the too difficult box and put further down in their priority list. We also know that organisations who have put the biggest investment into belonging, into inclusion, into diversity, including the way that they design their organisational workspaces, their flexibility of benefits that they provide and health benefits and all sorts of things, they're still struggling with this gender representation. So even the ones who we would see as the front runners in this field, so they would be people like Meta, who used to be Facebook, Google, Amazon, LinkedIn, and many other of these newer technology-based organisations still only find across their whole organisations, their whole staff teams, they only have 35% female representation. So that's after 15 years of dedicated research, dedicated investment. So we know that this is a difficult nut to crack. And here's another really interesting one. We're hearing such a lot these days about technology, about augmented technology through artificial intelligence that can help to shortcut decisions, that can get data to us in a record time. So Amazon, wanting to be a user of artificial intelligence to help speed up their processes, brought in a tool to help them with their recruitment process. And here's what happened with that recruitment process, is that the artificial intelligence would screen all of the CVs for a job that was advertised, and they would pull in the top 5 based on the best match of experience, of qualifications to the job, and put them in front of the recruiter. And then the recruiter would only have to look at them 5, interview them, and then maybe get the best person for the job. So it saved them a huge amount of time, but it also did some other unintended consequences for them. And one of the things that they found when they started to look at this over a period of months was that there was a 200% increase in the rejection rate of female applicants, to the point where almost all of their technical and engineering vacancies were only shortlisting male candidates. And they were going, what's going on here? This is artificial intelligence. This is supposed to be free of bias. But here's what they found, and here's what we're finding more and more, is artificial intelligence is only good as the intelligence that created it. So if the intelligence that created it has got some inherent bias, maybe some that they're not aware of, then that's going to come out in the programming of the artificial intelligence. And it's good to hear now that Amazon are not using this artificial intelligence tool, and they've gone back to human eyes, looking at applicants and considering them. But you can see how that's quite a considerable issue in terms of how bias is baked into things. But let's flip it on its side. Let's look at, what about if we get diversity and inclusion right as organisations? What are the benefits for us? So McKinsey found in their research, when they looked across many organisations, many industries, many sectors, one of the benefits was that those that were more diverse, those that had a more inclusive culture, had a 28% higher revenue. We also found that organisations that had majority, so we had a more diverse employee base, and also had more female leaders at the very top of their organisation, found that they earned on average 30% higher profits. A UK report that was looking at ethnic diversity in business found that if we could unlock the talent and the experience of people from Black and minority ethnic groups, we could see a boost of £24 billion pounds to the economy just from having more people with more skills actively contributing to it. We also found that more diverse organisations tended to halve their staff turnover. Now, staff attrition, particularly of highly skilled people that we don't want to lose, is a big cost issue after employment and after wages for organisations. So controlling turnover is a really big cost driver. So those that were more diverse, those that invested more in creating an inclusive culture, found that they halved that turnover, which led to a significant bottom line improvement. And finally, another piece of research found that companies adopted supplier diversity programs. So these are programs where they go out of their way and find suppliers for their whatever it is. It might be goods in their supply chain, it might be services to their corporate headquarters, it might be additional support that they need in different areas of their business. If they went out of the way to find people who had minority-owned companies and services available to them and brought them in, they typically saved 12% on their overall procurement and purchasing budgets. So they're just small ways that we can see that diversity can bring great benefits to an organisation. So let me tell you how in the Inclusion Edge, the book that I mentioned at the beginning, I approached this subject about, well, how can we help these majority leaders who are really struggling with the subject of diversity, equity, inclusion. They know it's important, but it's in the too difficult box, so they don't tend to give it the time that it deserves. And what I came up with was this model, which is a 6-step model, which I called the Belong model. And I'm going to take you through that in detail, but here's what it is. It's B for bias awareness, E for embody belonging, L for leverage experience, O for being open and curious, N for nourish roots, and G for grow opportunities. So each one of them is a practical step, and through that, awareness opens up. So let me share that with you. So bias awareness. So what did I say at the beginning of this webinar? I said that we cannot change what we're not aware of. So change comes from being aware of it. So to be an inclusive leader, the first step is just opening up that awareness. And we can do that in very simple ways. Some of the ways we can just do that is by just noticing the media that we're consuming. So that might be through newspapers, online social media, it can be through mainstream media, television and films. And just notice what might be going on in terms of bias there. Am I seeing a mainly white cast? Am I seeing a mainly able-bodied cast? Am I seeing a cast or a story or a perspective which is mainly heterosexual in the way that it portrays lifestyles? So what are these biases telling us about what's going on for the people who created them, and what is it they're giving to us that perpetuates that bias? The other way we can do that is through reading. There's lots of great books, both fiction and non-fiction available, which help us to understand more deeply the way that race, gender, disabledism and LGBT or homophobia plays out in society. And you can have a look at that in the films or books or in other social media. There's some great TED Talks as well. But that first step is being ready to open your eyes and become aware. And then the second step is, how do I embody what we would see as the typical behaviours of belonging? And often we do that by thinking about what would inclusion look like. So belonging is about going beyond inclusion. Inclusion is going out of our way to welcome people from diverse backgrounds into our organisation. Belonging is about not only welcoming people in because of their differences, but about celebrating that individuality as part of a collective whole. And to do this, we do the inner work, which is defining our own values. When we understand in what our values are, what maybe the top 4 or 5 are, we can help them to guide us in terms of our behaviours, what we focus on, what we can lean into, what we can contribute to build a culture which is very much about celebrating everyone and the individuality they bring. Next one is leverage experience. So this is about leveraging your experience. Because at the end of the day, we're all diverse, we're all unique, we all have perspectives which are unique to us, unique to what we have gone through in our life. And when we share sensitively our own experiences of exclusion, they will help us to build bridges to underrepresented employees. Connection comes through shared experience and understanding, and that's the key to bringing about some major shifts and changes in our culture to create cultures of belonging. And there's many places you can go for that, but often it's the places of the firsts. So the firsts are maybe thinking about your first day at primary school, your first day at secondary school, your first day in your first job, your first day in the job that you have now. Maybe when you moved house, getting used to a new area. Maybe when you got married, the first few months of settling down into a new relationship. If you had children, getting used to your child in the first year with a child. There's all sorts of times when we had a first. And often these first experiences help us to understand when we felt isolated, when we felt that we didn't belong, when we felt we were different from other people around us. And they can help us by understanding, maybe journaling that experience and then sharing that sensitively with others. We can show that we have understanding of when other people, maybe on a very daily basis, experience a lack of belonging and a lack of inclusion. Moving on from that is how then do we start to open up the right conversations? And it is very much about conversations. How do we start opening up and hearing the stories of the people around us? How do we share our stories with them, which helps them to understand that they're going to be heard and they're going to be valued? And it starts with us choosing to be open and curious. So a mindset that appreciates the unique aspects of everyone's journey is central to the concept of belonging. And what we can do is we can take an active interest in each of our employees so that you can see the whole person, not just the job title, not just the role they fulfill, but them in the context of the role that they're fulfilling right now. And we can do that by learning to just be better at opening up with questions. Asking questions which are more open-ended, being really good at eye contact, thinking about our body language, being relaxed and giving messages out to people that we're receptive and we want to hear from them. And that helps to then open up and bring conversations of real value. And even if they're not conversations which are always focused on work, they build really important relationships which mean that the work gets done. Then we look at nourishing green shoots, and very much like the idea of, when we put something in the ground, a seedling, it takes a lot of tender, loving care for it to turn into the seedling and then grow into the strong plant we want it to, because we give it lots of attention. And essentially we need to do that on this journey of belonging. And what we're doing in Nourishing Green Shoots is we're taking action to tip them diversity scales in the right direction. When we've gone on this journey, we've recognised inequality exists. We've recognised that there are places we can go to leverage that, and we take action. And this, like building up and growing the seedling, takes focus and effort. But you have lots of leverages in your organisation. There's employment groups that you can lean into and support. There's networks, professional networks that you can go to and learn more about diverse groups. There's community activities. There's ways that you can actually think about the way that you nurture your people in your organisation and get them ready for promotion and help them to advance their career. So you can think about that and think about that in a way that the intention is to help to advance the opportunities for people who maybe are in a position where they're not giving them opportunities normally. And then the final one is reaping all of the advantages for what you've sown. So that's very much about growing opportunities. And that is something you can do, if you're in a leadership position as line manager, but even if you're not, there's lots of ways you can look at helping to grow opportunities for other people. And there's a multi-pronged data-driven approach to it, but data is key. It's the lifeblood to most organisations, and it's often the good place to start. When we look at data, first we need awareness, and then we need to know the size of the problem. So data can help us to raise some really important questions, which is, do we have inequalities in terms of gender or race or LGBTQ, or maybe people with additional needs such as cognitive diversity? Can we see from the data inequalities that exist in the makeup of our teams, in the way that we promote, in the way that we recruit? And when we can ask these questions, we can look at the data and say, if it is telling us that there's some inequalities, what can we do about that? And we can identify meaningful interventions if we understand the size of the problem and what the data tells us the story. So growing opportunities helps us to use things that are already available in the organisation to take stock and then take some meaningful action to address it. So that's the majority of it. That's the majority of the model, and that's what the Inclusion Edge is encouraging people to do. And just some further thoughts on that. At the heart of diversity, equity and inclusion is people, and I think we forget that. I think we overcomplicate what we're trying to achieve here. But if we think the heart of it is in people, all we're trying to do is encompass in the most whole and human-centred way as possible all of their foibles, their eccentricities, their beliefs and their ways of behaving, and use that as fuel to actually bring them together and create diverse and vibrant workplaces. And the other thing is, as an individual, you can be a force for good. You remember what I said at the beginning, as it didn't start with you and it won't end with you. That is the case, but you can still be a force for good in how you choose to set the tone and signal the sense of belonging that you wish to create in your workplace. So we can change the world by changing ourselves. And based on some of what I've shared with you in this webinar today, think of some of the things that you could do differently. What's the one thing you can do maybe to reduce bias that maybe you have or that you see in the workplace? And I always say that change happens through action. So think about some of the ways that you can take action today. Maybe that's starting a conversation with your colleagues on bias that might exist. Maybe asking them, do they see some bias in the way you behave? Or have they noticed bias in the recruitment process? Or have you noticed the bias that might exist because of the way our leadership is made up, the formation of the team? And maybe ask for feedback on how you are doing and how you communicate, and look for that not just across your peer group, but other people who report to you that would be able to give you good feedback, or people outside of the workplace. And then maybe you could set a goal, maybe as part of a development plan that you have, about ways that you could reduce bias in the workplace. And that only needs to be maybe doing a unconscious bias training if that's what you have, or maybe checking in with people on a regular basis and asking them how you're doing. The goal can be anything you like, but maybe think about something you could set that could actually keep you on the right track. Now, I hope you found that useful. I love to keep the conversation going with you, so if you're interested in hearing more, or if you'd like a conversation about how you could bring these ideas alive in your workplace, then keep in touch with me. You can contact me at mary@agentstochange.com, and you can find me on LinkedIn or on Twitter, Mary T. Maguire. So thank you for your time today, and good luck in creating a culture of belonging in your workplace. Thank you. Have a great day.